listening to This Won't Fix You. I'm your host, Nadine, and this show is a curation of interesting models, metaphors and images discovered or manifested through my work as an accredited psychotherapist. You can expect to hear nifty ideas, clever language and thought-provoking ways of looking at life. Each episode, you'll get one of two alternating perspectives. First, a conversation which introduces and discusses the theory or idea, and we call this the A side, and then the B side, which, while not therapy, is a deeper exploration of that theory or idea from a more therapeutic standpoint. Hello everybody, today we're looking at the idea that we all know that we put out into the world what we want to receive ourselves. This is a concept widely accepted in philosophical and spiritual traditions, but it also overlaps with certain principles and theories of psychology and psychotherapy, such as the mirror principle, Jung's shadow side, cognitive dissonance, self-verification. We may or may not get onto that, but if we don't, then that's something that might come up in the B-side anyway. And it's relevant really for everybody. I think this pops up for absolutely everybody because it's essentially about blind spots that we might have, how we are so often unaware of the processes that dictate our thoughts and feelings and behaviours, what we're drawn to, when and why. And the idea was proposed to me by my friend and colleague Emma McDermott. Emma's a therapist who works in North Manchester out of a room in Salford. Emma, hello.
Hi, Nadine.
Do you want to say a few things about yourself and what it is that you do?
Yeah, it's nice to be here today. Thanks for the invitation. I am a therapist and I work from the Angel Centre in Salford. My specialisms include domestic abuse. Also, I've worked with people that are in recovery from addictions, and I also support families with children with disabilities and their friends and people affected by children with brain injury. So that's quite a
broad spectrum.
Smorgasbord of specialisms. So, yeah, it's just funny what turns up, really.
What interests you as you're going along that you end up kind of magnetised to.
Yeah, and where the opportunities are as well of what you're drawn to and what presents. So, yeah, and I think that probably leads on a little bit to what I proposed to talk about today.
Go ahead.
Yeah.
What does it mean to you? What is it?
So this idea came right at the end of my own therapy session with my therapist, and she said to me, we all put out into the world, Emma, what we want for ourselves, and you know this too. And I thought, do I? Do I know this? Part of me knows this, but now it was like a lightning rod that kind of, I had to take this in and do something with it.
It was the right time.
Yeah, it was the right time to hear this. And as a middle-aged woman that has been working with somebody for ages, it was that lightning rod moment. And where it took me was, it's just time to think about things different. It's time to stop thinking about the reasons why I can't, the blame or the ideas that things sit outside my power and outside my authority. And to start taking care of things and maybe doing things differently.
What do you mean by blame? What was the blame?
Just the idea of kind of maybe sometimes when we start, especially in the therapeutic process of these are all the reasons, or this person has done this and I feel slighted, or the injustices of the world and the relationships that we've thrived and suffered in and been challenged by, to, I suppose, really kind of buckle up and be a bit more courageous with my own agency and my own autonomy.
That's quite a rigorous scrutiny of yourself, and it was reminding me of the 12 steps, that point on the 12 steps, which you will know more about.
It's step 4, I think, that you're talking about, is this: make a fearless moral inventory of yourself. And then after that is the making amends. And I really sort of could identify with people that go on that journey of self-discovery, accountability, that moral inventory. And I thought, well, this is my time now. This is kind of something that I thought I'd already done, but tapped me on the shoulder and was like, no, it's time to make, my fears my agenda. And I'm tripping over the words to do this because this is why I'm here now. to be speaking publicly, to make a stand, to say anything personal and, about myself is part of the reason why I'm here, because this is so far out of my comfort zone.
Well, thank you very much for showing up. You said make my fears my agenda. Did you say that? That's really powerful and brave.
Gotcha. Yeah, I am squirming in this chair, like pushing against it. Thinking, how do we go from here? So yeah, make my fears my agenda, which I think comes with a certain extent of, it's taken a lot of work to get here, because I think we need stability to be able to get curious about ambivalence, about complexity, around the duality of things. And that's, really struck me at this stage in my life.
That you perhaps are more secure now than you've been before?
Yeah, or more sure of my own identity, or more confident because of the amount of time and the experiences that I have. But I also know that I'm quite wedded, that's a good word, to the roles that I play as well, mother, friend, all these different roles. And I'm also examining that perspective as well, as to when these roles change, as in my children grow up and leave and do their thing, what then? I'm preparing for my life to change through the roles that I play now, evolving and dissipating and things moving away from me. So there's also this process of this feeling like quite a massive clear out of doing kind of that life laundry aspect as well. What are the learnings and how do I embed those? How do I integrate those? Where are my blind spots? What am I missing? Where do I grow from this? And am I challenging myself enough? Am I holding myself to account?
Can we get specific? Blind spots?
Yeah, okay. So what am I putting out into the world that I want for myself? So this felt like I could break this into two parts. Is what am I transmitting out in the world? What does that mean? And then what is this process that I am engaging with? So when I thought about what I'm transmitting out into the world, I thought about how serious I can be. And then I thought also that I have a real appetite for humour and for fun. And that's connected to, how I was raised by my dad and the Irish sort of culture of laughing. And, if you know crack, then, you're doomed regardless of what you do, or, but you have to be good crack as well, And seeing where that was playing out, sometimes I was feeling kind of starved for affection or tenderness. And that was showing up for me in lots of different ways. Like, if I'm being really honest, it's kind of, sometimes I felt like I could sob, but I wasn't in a place or had a reason to sob. It's because, I don't know, there was a sob underneath my cleaning the dishes or something. And when I went and got hugs, or I went and asked for what I needed and the care that I needed from my partner or from my children or from my family and friends, it was always there. But it took me a while to notice that, there was part of me that had a real yearning and that was hungry for something that was, unanswered.
And until you call that kind of forth into your awareness, then you can see what's driving you while you're doing the dishes and you've got that sob. If you're pulling it and you're kind of looking for, what all the signs that there is something going on, you're just scrutinising every bit of data that you've got in your body, then you can surely get your needs met. Like you said, you went to friends, you went to family for hugs or whatever it was that you needed at the moment, and that actually brought you comfort then.
Yeah.
And so I think what people often do, what we often do, and I'm going to hold myself in this as well, is that we feel shame or we blame ourselves for wanting that in the first place. I'm washing up, I've had a good day, why am I feeling like I want to have a cry or whatever? Does that make sense? That you then get your needs met. You're in a better place if you've got that kind of just that intention on and an allowance for what surfaces.
Yeah, and a curiosity around it, but not to the point of maybe flipping into feeling embarrassed about it, giving it some time to kind of sit with me and be with me so I know if it's reoccurring. I mean, sometimes it's like, it's lyrics in a song that just get me, and I just can't, I need to understand why it's revisited me, you know, this idea of, you know, emotional landscapes. Bjork is one of my favourite songs, Yoga, and it's just the waves of the rise of the feelings, and then the beauty of that, maybe, or
richness.
The richness, or the humanity of it, the humbling experience of that.
Because you're welcoming all of it. You're saying all of it is welcome, not just the stuff that's going to make me a good crack or make me smile and be happy. You're actually saying that even the stuff that on the surface feels more painful actually has something to teach you, something to enrich your life with.
It's data. And I think this is why I feel raw talking about this, or this is why it feels like I've got this sense of, I want to come and talk about this, because the process almost makes me feel young again. It's almost like asking the questions that you've already asked and having the humility to be childish again about it, you know. Make my fears my agenda is, you know, what do I want? What do I feel? And what am I going to do to feel right about that with myself? And when you want something that is as basic as tenderness and the vulnerability that goes with that, for asking for that from your partner, or asking for that from your children or your family, you know, it's humbling, it's connected, it's meaningful, and it gives them a chance to know me, and for me not to be just kind of running around filling the void. If I let my heart speak and also my head speak, if I allow the quiet part to be said but also the loud part to be quiet, it takes me to that place also of noticing the contradictions and noticing kind of, why am I being so binary about this as well? Why am I either kind of serene and calm and harmonious with myself, or like a tornado, you know, churning up the house, and anything that comes into contact with me flies off because
it's not allowed, because I'm in this state right now.
Yeah, and
that's exclusive.
I'm giving out. I'm emitting this. I'm doing this. You know, get out of my way, because I'm just gonna cut through everything.
You said to me once a quote about ambiguity, which I thought was beautiful. Ambiguity is a luxurious position.
Yeah.
That's the one that you shared with me, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Ambiguity is a luxurious position. You can't allow ambiguity when things are unstable. Mm-hmm. So you're saying it's a luxurious place to be, to not ping to the binary, to not need to know, but to sit in that sort of space of curiosity, which is, I have to say, quite a frightening space sometimes, because we need to know. It's more important that we know things about ourselves than we investigate truths. It's much more important that we've got that kind of answer. Mm-hmm. And I think our culture perpetuates that as well.
And I think, though, as well, when we meet people on a therapeutic journey and people that come and sit with us as well, is it realistic when somebody is processing their distress and their trauma and their life experiences and their losses and their grief, to always expect them to do that eloquently or easily or without suspicion? Because there's a clinging that we want of certainty, and there's a clinging that we might want for oversimplified answers, that it's taken me so many years to get to that place, and years of life experience as well, that it just really kind of keeps me humble to want to meet the person where they're at. You know, if somebody's in crisis, then there isn't that stability to hold the duality sometimes, or even the multiplicity, because it just needs to be, right, I put this foot here and this foot there and that foot there, you know, one step in front of the other. It has to be really simple. And I think that's the beauty of mutual aid. The 12 steps program is, you know, this has got hard lines, this has got a structure, this is like, we'll help you, we'll show you where to put your feet, we'll show you that this bit goes here, and that, you know, you can count on that working, because we've walked this path too.
It has to give the person who's in the distress the confidence that this process will take them. I think that's what people come into therapy with. please, can you be the person who holds this? Can you be the person who sees that there's an arc here, that I'm going to come out of this tunnel at some point?
Yeah.
And there's something about 12 Steps program that offers that sort of space in the same way that therapy perhaps does.
Yeah.
This is a process. There is an end to this process.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And I think that we collaborate with people and we help them understand their narratives and we help them build layers to that and we help create a coherent story of their lives, which then can be absorbed and it can percolate and they can integrate that. But I think it's that recognising that there's a cycle that goes on with the doing the work, absorbing that, integrating that, and then maybe going again. Yeah, the spiral or that, it might even be a virtuous circle, I'm thinking. I'm not thinking it's a spiral that goes down and it gets smaller at the circles in the middle. I feel like this is a virtuous spiral where it's kind of getting bigger. Mm-hmm. I'm doing this hand motion here, like this definitely getting bigger on this side, where you can, like not like the tornado when I'm in a internal headspace but it's more of the, okay, yeah, I can think about that, I can hold that, I've got some ease with this material.
Where does that come from? How do people cultivate that?
I think it might change, day by day sometimes when you can do that, depending on your mood, your
agenda for the day.
Your agenda for the day, where you're coming from, where you're going to, what you've got to look forward to. Do you know Daniel Kahneman? So his idea is kind of system 1 is the reflex stuff, the thing that comes without.
What do you mean by system?
So he breaks it down into system 1 and system 2. So system 1 is kind of like, what happens without thinking, our reflexes. And system 2 is the things that needs more scrutiny, where we have to pay attention, where we have to focus on things.
There are systems, response systems.
Yeah.
Response system 1, response system 2.
Yeah, that's how he does it. Talks about it and thinking fast and thinking slow. Now, I'll come clean. I've not read the whole book. I've read the bits that have caught my eye on different days. So it's not, the most thorough understanding of his work. But when I do dip in and out of it, like even the small sections, I can always find something that I can relate to. And I think that the cognitive ease part of, you can tell when you listen to us, when we're smiling or when we sound upbeat in our voices or when we're enjoying or stimulated, and that's kind of system 1. And system 2 might be when we're, grappling with the more difficult stuff or we're engaged in more complexity. And I just wonder sometimes of what we're talking about as well, of what we're capable of noticing is when we're in that place of things feel easy. We're not in cognitive strain, where we don't feel overwhelmed and we don't feel overloaded. That this idea of we've got the luxury of stability, we've got the luxury of comfort, means that we are open for more and we are feeling harmonious enough in ourselves.
And again, that's the spiral, isn't it? That's the virtuous circle that you're talking about, because when we're in that space, then we have more capacity to tolerate difference, to tolerate ambiguity, to tolerate perhaps our own, I don't want to say failings, but you talked about humanity. I think that's a really beautiful way of kind of reframing our failings, really, because we are human and we are all going to fail. But then when we're in that space and we've got all that time and emotional space to investigate things in more detail, then that leads to a more expansive place. So when we're in crisis, we don't have that luxury. Mm-hmm. It's a marvel that we ever get out of crisis.
It is a marvel that we ever get out of crisis. And I think, do we bounce from crisis to crisis, or do we bounce from, the space in between that? Or is it even more important to notice the space in between that, because we could be just attached to the cycle of crisis and the cycle, because that's where our brains go most naturally, because that's where there's most risk to us. This isn't my idea. This is Danny Kahneman's idea as well, that
we're drawn to crisis.
We're drawn to the things that are a threat to us because we need to know more about that.
And how do we take that to other people? How do we relate then? So what you're saying is, if we don't have the capacity and we are in that crisis, how do we then relate? Because that then is out of our awareness. We're surviving. We can barely put one foot in front of the other. And so I'm curious then about how we take that perspective to the world, that we're feeling utterly depleted, that when we're out in the world in crisis, we feel depleted. We've got all these needs pulling us. We're not aware of any of them. That's going to change the way that we relate to people. That's going to change the way that the expectations that we have of the world and the people in it.
Yeah. I think we might be closed off, or we might be focused on our own internal narrative at that point, or we might be just unable to see the differences and hold them as something that isn't rivalry or isn't competing with us. And I found a really lovely quote from James Hollis that was about love during middle life, is that love is a good sense of what it's like to be that other person and to affirm them in that difference. So you don't want to, do the enmeshment. You don't want to kind of live off them by, this unity that's going to spare you and be them, they be your magical other that answers all your shortcomings. It's this idea of no, I understand and I want to understand. Maybe not wholly, because I don't think we can ever really do that, what it's like to be you. And to allow that and affirm that.
I get that, I understand that. It's about appreciating and loving the difference.
Yeah.
Rather than needing the security of somebody else's sameness, which is what we do as teenagers. You see teenage children, so teenagers do that. We have to all be the same because we're so insecure, we're so frightened, our identity is so fragile that what we need is we all need to look the same, we all need to say the same things, we all need to believe the same things. And there's a real beauty and a liberation, isn't there, in having people's difference brought to us, providing those people expressing their differences are appreciative also of ours, that makes that a beautiful and easy connection.
I think you struck on the importance of reciprocation in a dignified relationship and how important affirmation is in a collaboration. I don't really know what I mean by that, but I feel like the textures of a healthy relationship is kind of what we're touching on here, of not kind of having a big agenda to change somebody and falling in love with someone's potential, and who's not done that, of kind of thinking all these little minor tweaks without taking the time to think, I wonder what my minor tweaks would be, which is really making me laugh at the minute. But also this idea of the collaboration of what you create together, which is quite an interesting space to be in, isn't it, really?
It's a bit of a fantasy world, isn't it? When we meet people and like those tweaks that you're talking about, and we kind of imagine, I can see who this person's going to be in 10 years' time, or I can, they'd be great if they weren't late all the time, or whatever. There's something fantastical about that, because we're not relating to them as they are.
Yeah.
So not only are we expecting them to be different, but we're, elevating ourselves to some kind of position. It's an omniscient position where the other person is inferior. The other person has got work to do, like you say, because I'm perfect, because I've got nothing. And we do come at relationships, don't we, a lot with that sense of, because we're on the inside of ourselves, we know why we're doing things. Our motivations are absolutely clear. I've said this quote in a podcast before, but I have to say it again because it's just so beautiful. All behaviours make sense for the belief system. Mm-hmm. And so if we go into a relationship and we think that we are inadequate and we feel that we are inadequate, then we will read hostility towards our own inadequacy. We're going to read that in other people. There's another quote I've got somewhere as well about the self-verification theory by William Swan, where we seek out situations and relationships that confirm who we are, whether they're positive or negative. And so even if who we think we are is a bad person or is shameful or doesn't have an awful lot to offer our friends. So if we have low self-esteem, then we will gravitate towards people who treat us poorly. That is what we do. And because it confirms everything. I think that's, again, a really good advert, isn't it, for paying attention to what's going on? Because if we can grab hold of some of that, then we stop going to the relationship to fix the gap in us or to confirm something. We're just open to the possibility of change all the time.
if we're talking about mental health, I think sometimes it sits, and this isn't just my idea, it's Nancy McWilliams, that if we are free from anxiety or free from insomnia or free from our grief, then we are mentally well. Because none of us are going to live a sterile life where we're never thrown any curveballs, or we avoid loss of ourselves, loss of our dreams, loss of our relationships. And that has to be something that we are doing a dance with in therapy, that we are modelling maybe, not just eradicate things with advice or coping strategies, of like, no, this is the richness of life. This is coming for all of us. And I often think about that of, what can I do more of? What am I more capable of receiving through my relationships, my therapy sessions, my encounters, my courageous conversations at work? Where am I growing?
I love what you say about a sterile life, that a lot of people do want to cut out the part of themselves that isn't functioning, or that relationship that isn't working, or a fear that they have. They just want to get rid of it. Anxiety, I just want to get rid of it. I just want to be free of it. I've had so many conversations in the last few months, actually, that seem to fit this heading really specifically, where people come in and they're saying, I need your help to get rid of this thing. And I've had to say, in initial phone calls as well as in early sessions, we can't get rid of the thing. And if we do get rid of the thing, all we're going to do is give you a temporary sense of peace, because what you're looking for there is, like you said, some sort of sterility where I can manage just to stop everything else coming at me rather than change myself so that I can handle what comes at me. There's a beautiful quote, isn't there? You prepare the child for the path, not the path for the child. Take child out there. That's what we're doing, isn't it? We're trying to prepare. Well, we're not doing that. We're trying to enable the person to see that they have the capacity to prepare themselves for their path, rather than some kind of sterility. But that then often requires people to pull forward from their past things that have been really challenging that they would rather forget.
Yeah, and if that is too much, I often think that we can work with what's happening in the here and now, because it'll show up. But if people can, work with the here and now and, experiment with, curiosity and compassion. Maybe it started like here in my childhood. This was the first time that I noticed that I felt this sort of inadequacy. This was kind of when I first noticed that I wanted this to be in my life. But I like to think about things in quite an expansive kind of way, because I think that and this is my personality for sure, of this kind of the contradictions or finding the opposite position of we are coming because we are in distress and we're trying to get rid of something, but once that is kind of spoken to and addressed and brought forward into the consciousness, is there room for something that is more expansive, more freedom from this distress to live, work and play in a more vital, more connected way?
Present.
Yeah, present.
Because you're not expecting the situation to be anything.
Yeah, which takes us then into attachment, doesn't it? We don't have an attachment for an outcome. We're just open to whatever is or however it unfolds.
How does that play out when you're a parent and you've got to get the kids ready for school? Because then that's not possible, is it? Well,
you'll just do whatever is, within arm's reach. You'll put the telly on and dress them while they're kind of watching CBeebies, or you'll do whatever to get things out of the door. To get them out of the door. It's you lower your standards.
So we're talking about an idealised relating.
Yeah. And I think maybe that is. I also now am thinking in this list that I'm looking at of 16 things that show psychological wellness through Nancy McWilliams' lecture is this idea of, she calls it mentalisation, which sounds quite vague, but it's this understanding of to know my own mental state and to be interested in the others. So as a mother, I know my child's got up a little bit late. I know that they might have gone to bed later because they've been doing sport. How do I hold and contain that whilst feeling my own frustrations around time, or feeling like I've got to get them in the car because I've got my first client at this time, and the whole thing has got to keep moving, and to prioritise and centre the movement and hold their mental state, my mental state. I mean, it makes it sound a lot more complicated than, throwing the shoes in the car up, saying put them on in the back seat, I'll carry you to the car. Yeah. She calls it mentalisation, but I think we're also talking about here this idea of knowing ourselves, and then also being open to the mental state of others and how that works in our interactions.
When it comes to the crunch, the pivot moments where I have to contact somebody that I've treated poorly, or when I have to, make amends, as the 12 steps point that you were mentioning earlier, when I have to take responsibility for something that I've done, and I'm fascinated by the concept of self-blame versus responsibility, but I think that's a separate podcast. When I have to take responsibility, that then is the bit where you're saying about the system too. That point, I have to take a step back and right, okay, I am about to enter a potentially thorny dynamic. I have to contact somebody that I feel I've mistreated, or where I've lost myself in this relationship completely, and so I have some amends to make. I have to think really carefully about being able to present myself in a way that does not demand anything of the other person. So my apology cannot demand anything of the other person. But at the same time, I want that other person to feel like they have freedom to speak their truth as well. Because when I'm flailing and flying around, that is not the place then to go to the other person. So we have to take responsibility for ourselves and our state that we're in, and know I'm not even stable enough to take myself for that apology. Because if I go in this state, I'm going to be going, yeah, but you, rah, rah, rah. And that's not an apology. An apology is, this is what I'm responsible for, and I am so sorry. And I have to leave space then for the other person to give me whatever they have to give me without trying to wriggle out of my apology. And I keep coming back to that word, luxurious. That is a luxurious place to be, to have the time and the capacity to be able to sit on my own long enough to be able to come out with an apology. Does any of that make sense?
Absolutely. I mean, that sounds like quite a spiritual place as well that you've landed on. Now, I'm bringing my stuff to this for sure, but I wonder kind of like to move through this self-blame and this self-criticism aspect of it. You have to start forgiving yourself, of owning your part, but then also of showing yourself the compassion for taking responsibility, for showing up that way. And there might be so many steps of forgiveness or manoeuvrings around that you're doing with yourself before you don't need that from somebody else, before you're solid enough in that position of sincere apology, that you come in earnest of knowing the multiple aspects of what's being spoken about, and you're not asking for them to soothe you because you've done that for yourself, which feels so grown up, doesn't it, really? But it also feels like that takes accountability to another level, because you're not coming with a void or a vulnerability that you're asking somebody else or another thing, alcohol, drugs, to take away from you.
When we go with that apology, there is another person with another reality who experienced something completely differently to what we experienced, and we have to have an openness to their perspective, which is a real challenge. And also, at the same time, to know that we are not responsible for the whole thing. Because there are two people in that dynamic, or more, whatever it was. Yes, I'm responsible, and these are the parts I'm responsible for. I am not all to blame, because there's someone else in this too. So I think that notion of taking responsibility is really, I don't know, it's quite an understated thing. There's so much that goes underneath that. Yes, I'm going to take responsibility for these parts. There are these parts that I am not responsible for. I'm not going to lay down in front of you and say I did all of this. I didn't.
And are we back in where we started of this idea? Are we putting out into the world what we want for ourselves? Are we transmitting at that point an invitation for somebody else to go through this moral inventory? Or is it an invitation for them to reflect there's something that's going on. I don't, we would like to come to it without any expectation or attachment, but there's at least one process going on there, isn't it? In the apology of I'm going to be sincere and I'm going to put this out in a vulnerable way, show my humanity. But if somebody said, okay, and walked off, you'd be disappointed, wouldn't you?
And yet you have to, if you're going at the situation with an apology like that, you've got to be open to the fact they might go, thank you, it's not enough.
This is sometimes the music behind the words. When we're sat with somebody, they're saying something, but there's a lot more going on beneath the surface, or things aren't chiming with, they're saying one thing, but the face is tense and tight. They're saying, yeah, I'm fine, everything's going well at work, yeah, nothing to report. And there's a kind of a tension all down the neck. But I notice it, or where it's easiest to describe maybe, is about anger. You come away feeling angry with what's being said, but they've delivered it in a way that is quite, goosey-loosey, easy-breezy, neutral about this. Because they've rehearsed this, or because they've got so long getting used to it. And it isn't for me to kind of pour my instant reactions all over their injustices or their grievances or their struggles. It's more kind of like, how do I sit with this? And if this is a repetition in the next session, or there's things that are kind of being overlooked that this collaboration is going to help with, how do we work with this as kind of, the raw material to build with as well? And I think that's sometimes where I use my congruence, or this makes it sound like it's really, calculated, where there's an intervention.
You basically bring that process.
Yeah, and that process of, I'm noticing that you are talking really animated about this in a kind of, upbeat kind of way, but I'm holding a lot of sadness around this. I know that there's part of you that feels really strong and proud of all the progress you've made, but there's also the parts of loss, or there's parts of grief.
So as a therapist, we're trained, and experience has trained us, as well as the course that we do, trains us to see that, to notice it in us, to notice when somebody is projectively identifying, when they're actually implanting something in us. We all do this in the outside world.
Yeah.
We're in the outside world. We're expecting other people always to respond to our needs, or we're flailing in the world. We're giving out all these sort of emotional spores, and everybody else is breathing them and taking them on board unwittingly. Because certainly when I'm not sitting in my therapy room, I'm not as aware of all the places and the ways that I'm pulled. It's definitely something that I'm tuning into when I'm in the room, because it's quite tiring to do that. So it's not something I do. For instance, if you and I go for a coffee, I'm not then going to be sitting there thinking, what's Emma trying to make me do here? What emotional spores is Emma giving off? We're just chatting about whatever.
Yeah.
But we must give them off anyway, especially if we're talking about things that are contentious or agitating.
Yeah. Having the whole connected experience with ourselves and our stories and how we engage with that. But I think truthfulness is a precondition for change.
Oh, hang on, pause. Truthfulness is a precondition for change.
Yeah.
Can you say some more?
Yeah. I think this is an Adam Phillips idea. How do we know that we're ready for change? Because we can think we are, but unless we are ready to do things differently, we can't always just think our way through things. What are we going to translate into an action, into our behaviours? I wonder if it's that moral inventory again, of that kind of hard look at ourselves, because it's connected then to accountability, isn't it? This true process of truthfulness. It's truthfulness or honesty. It's essential.
And it's essential for a positive relating then, isn't it? Because if we're going into relationships unaware of the way that truths are pulling us, or in the way that we're lying to ourselves, then our relationships are not going to be, those relating moments are not going to be successful, are they? This reminds me of cognitive dissonance. The notion that we seek consistency between our beliefs and the outside world. And so when, let's say, for instance, smoking, if we think about smoking, we might think that smoking is bad, That might be our belief. That's the thing that's internal. I believe smoking is bad. But I smoke. So there's got to be some truth in there. And if I can't find the truth of, right, well, why am I treating myself in a way that is, bad for me, in a way that is going to shorten my life and potentially in quite a cruel and horrible way, then what we do is, if we're unaware or incapable of looking for that truth, what we do is we then add a new thought. So instead of smoking is bad, I smoke, we then add a new thought, which is, well, we've all got to die of something. So I'm rationalising my behaviour, but in the situation where we don't, where there is dissonance, that is deeply uncomfortable, and it always leads us to facing a truth. If how we feel about something, I believe in integrity, this is really important to me, and if I've ever behaved outside of integrity, that is excruciating for me. And to have to face that and accept that about myself, that is a truth that I find really, really difficult to face. So I could find all sorts of excuses for myself and create another thought, another belief that then smooths it all over. Or I could sit and try and face the thing that I've done that does not match my belief. Or I change my belief and say, yeah, I aim for integrity most of the time. And sometimes I fuck it up.
Yeah. I mean, what a ride that is. We're talking about self-deception. We're talking about living in a space of denial. We're talking about, again, accountability and that owning the parts of ourselves and our stories where the guilt and the shame is hiding away.
Yeah, I have come up short of my expectations of myself.
Yeah.
So what am I going to do now?
Yeah.
Am I going to pretend I didn't? Am I going to change my beliefs? Or am I going to invent something new?
What am I going to do to make that right for myself, or so that I can sleep at night, or that I'm not grinding my teeth, or that, I'm not flowering in cold sores all the time. That radical honesty. And I think about the radical honesty and who that's available to. I'm a 46-year-old, well-educated white woman, with years of therapy and a very comfortable family and situation around me. For people that are challenged by the system more, for people of colour, for people of different cultural backgrounds that sit in different communities, is this always online and available for them? Or are they more in that system 2 perspective of having to worry about, think about, plan for, second guess, be suspicious of, be worried about, feel like that's not for them. Can't access it through language, through, disability or ability. I think about that sometimes, which blows the doors open to things.
See what people have had to journey just to get in the door.
Yeah.
To something that, like you say, you and I are in a privileged position to be able to avail ourselves, take advantage of.
I wanted to say a quote by Louis Cozolino. Psychotherapy is an optimistic endeavour that demands the possibility of change.
The word demand is quite key there, isn't it? Because it's hard.
It is hard.
To change is hard. We love to cling, don't we?
We do love to cling. I think that's kind of why I always land on courage, truthfulness, sensitivity, and not just curiosity, because sometimes curiosity can feel like it definitely needs the compassion with it as well, for the sensitivity around when we can and when we can't, when we've got that cognitive ease and we're not in cognitive strain and we've kind of got that more expansive
that luxury,
that luxury available to us.
Emma McDermott, where can people find you?
I am on the counselling directory and I am on the BACP website. I will have my own website up and running very soon.
I remain hopeful that I will have my own website.
I've only been paying for it for the last 5 years and not actually got it up and running.
Thanks ever so much.
Thank you.
There's something really exciting I want to share with you all. I've been looking for a way to make it easy for you folks to get in touch that isn't social media, and I'm delighted to say that I've found it, and it's really easy for you to use too. Just go to the show notes and you'll see the link. It just says send me a text message. Click that and you'll be taken through the process. Please know that the function is one way only, but while I can't reply to you directly, I do read all the messages, and I am excited to respond to some of your comments in the podcast in the future. Of course, you could also use this feature to share with me any ideas you might have for future episodes. I look forward to hearing from you. Thanks for being with us this episode. The B-side, which takes one aspect of this episode and digs a little deeper into how that might be explored in the therapy room, will drop very soon. In the meantime, if you'd like to have more of our conversations and metaphorical excavations, it would be grand for you and grand for us if you would subscribe to the podcast or share a favourite episode with a friend.